The concept of epic, is this something that's been in your head for a long, long time?
I wouldn't say for a long, long time. But I think it's like all of these things. When I look back now, sort of over my shoulder, I can see some of the seeds that were being planted that grew into what became epic. All right, and that would go back to. I mean, these things are all personal. They're all individual. To leaving Ireland at the age of 10. I have been lucky enough to have lived and worked in 11 countries on 5 continents, right? And I mean lucky. I mean, luck is a big part of it. Something comes up and they say, well, we'll put him there. And, you know. But you then become what Theresa May doesn't like, a globalist, okay? You actually don't belong anywhere. I've never voted in an election in my life because I've never been eligible to vote, all right? And I'm partly a political animal. I was involved in politics at university and what have you. So for me to say I've never voted, I mean, it's just terrible. But that gives you a very different perspective. It changes you in many, many ways. The roots were always Irish, obviously because of my family, partly reinforced by sport, love of rugby, following Irish rugby. I mean, there are little things that connect. We did keep coming back, but not that often. But there's always been a big expatriate Irish community. Most of the places, or where it's not large, you pick up the perception, the different perception that people have about Irish people. And I think that's at the core of the whole thing. I have this detribalized accent from losing what used to be a Northern Irish accent, and no one would understand what I was saying, to this sort of mid-African sort of what used to be Rhodesian type accent. But people are trying to place you. I say, where are you from? And the moment you say Ireland, oh, you're Irish. Oh, there is a very positive view of being Irish. There's a differentiation that I didn't believe people in Ireland understood, right? And that I was seeing that positioned me, the moment I said I was Irish, positioned me completely differently. If I had said, with due respect to the English, I'm English, I said, oh, you're English, yes, well, I thought you might have been, that's it. But Ireland is, I've got particularly in the United States, for example, where I've worked for quite a considerable amount of time. Oh yes, I've got a grandfather who came from Kerry, or they know it. They also had maybe some German ancestry, but they don't know anything about that. Just somehow or other, there's a connectivity. I guess epic came out of that. It was also, what do we do with the building? All right, and I mean, this was a building. This was not what I intended to buy. Okay, I was looking for real estate. I bid on a couple of office spaces, which are nice and easy. It was not because I'm Irish, but because I believed that Ireland was going to be the one that was going to come out, and it was the best place in the world to invest at that time, which it was. But then saw this place and fell in love with it. And I suppose, again, it's another seed, because the historic nature of it, etc., what captures you, apart from, of course, the actual building itself and the like. And the vaults were then a part of that as well. So then you marry the vaults and the history of this building together. You say, what do we do with the vaults? One of the things that enabled me to buy it at a reasonable price, because other people didn't bid, because they didn't know what to do with the vaults. There was no economic value to the vaults in terms of other people's calculations. And I felt that there was, sometimes there's a penny that drops. You wake up one morning and say, and you don't know where it comes from in your mind, but I'm trying to say the seeds, and I say, you know what, we've got to tell the story of the Irish that left. I was one of them. And I came across so many Irish people who've been successful, and I said, why and how? And the Irish have a disproportionate influence in the world to the size of the society and the country. The world of Coke would have been part of it, because actually I knew and understood that. This is obviously in a way different, but I did have knowledge of what could be done and how you could excite people around things.
It's show business.
Yeah, it's show business, absolutely. And look, I'm not a professional marketeer, but I've been in the marketing world, so these things click for me. Definitely an analogy, because you've been to the world of Coke. The history is told. The instance here, we got some bad history to tell. Coke being Coke, if there was any, it's hidden. Okay, but still, you tell the history. But then you go into today, and in today you go into interactivity, you go into engagement, you go into exciting people about it. Okay, so although we got the name museum because it's the best fit around it, we are not, museums, dusty artifacts. We're not dusty artifacts because we're using 4G technology, we've shot a lot of video, but of course there's as with the world of Coke, there's a lot of deep research that went into discovering that, getting the dust out of the files and finding out some of the history, and interesting little nuggets that you can tell stories around. So yeah, there's definitely an analogy between the two. They're very different in terms of content, but the way that it's delivered is very similar. People didn't understand the level of contribution that Ireland was making in the world overall. Now that's a big statement, and I'm not trying to be the person who positions Ireland, but there was a reality there that was not being captured in the right way, and that's where it came together and saying, I need to tell the story of the diaspora, the success of the Irish, and we could have included the success of people who are still living within Ireland. For example, we don't have U2, we don't have Bono, because they didn't live outside Ireland. People actually, we get criticised for that, but I think they're well represented anyway. It's just the whole diaspora piece that's not. The more I got into it, the more I got energized by it, because I discovered things I didn't know. Well, I think first of all we underestimated the startup time in terms of getting noticed on playing on the pitch, all right, and that as we go back, I think we were overly optimistic about that, and we've realized that now. There's a lot of shoe leather to be worn off to get noticed, and now we're about to hit a record day today. You annualize it because we're on the upward trend. For certainly 100, probably 120, we're now pacing. So it's definitely moving. There's no question about it, and it was just really getting our act together properly. And we did have a management change that took place because Mervyn only took over in September. He was busy doing CHQ because we've got a number of different things happening within the building. The building itself, my concept for the building was this was not a shopping centre because it had been a failed shopping centre, but it was a place which had different day parts which we could activate in different ways in different parts of the building at different times. So that's why we've got dog patch, so we've actually got a business, but again, a leading edge business here, which gives us some gravitas as well, but also excitement, young people. You've also got to think about the area we're in, the International Financial Centre, and the demographic that you have here. But then we've got this great lunch business. Now we don't run it. There are all other entrepreneurs who run it, but we do the wraparound. We put in the fastest Wi-Fi in Ireland. I mean, they were doing 300 lunches a day when we took the building over in August, August the 13th. We're now doing 2,500. In fact, we can't cope. We're just so busy. Definitely an analogy, because you've been to the world of Coke. The history is told. The instance here, we got some bad history to tell. Coke being Coke, if there was any, it's hidden. Okay, but still, you tell the history. But then you go into today, and in today you go into interactivity, you go into engagement, you go into exciting people about it. Okay, so although we got the name museum because it's the best fit around it, we are not, museums, dusty artifacts. We're not dusty artifacts because we're using 4G technology, we've shot a lot of video, but of course there's again, as with the world of Coke, there's a lot of deep research that went into discovering that, getting the dust out of the files and finding out some of the history, and interesting little nuggets that you can tell stories around. So yeah, there's definitely an analogy between the two. They're very different in terms of content, but the way that it's delivered is very similar. We actually thought that Epic would be driving traffic into CHQ. We actually have succeeded with CHQ quicker than we thought we would, and Epic's been slower. So from my standpoint, there's a reasonable balance here, and this has now become more of a place to come to. We've got an events business. We just had an orchestra playing here one evening. People now cross the river to come and see us, and I always thought we could do that. I mean, people said, well, you're the wrong side of the river, it's the wrong location, and I said, well, time-wise, we're not the wrong location. It's a mind thing, and we've got a pedestrian bridge that leads right into the building. So, and also that I really believe that the growth was going to take place here, and it has. Now this place, this side of the river is now taken off. So I suppose that's luck and maybe a little bit of good judgment. I don't know, but so you've got to marry all of these things. I mean, the vaults just seem such a natural. I mean, obviously it's atmospheric, it's historic. It is weatherproof as an exhibit, which is pretty important, being Ireland. And probably we don't like sunny days as much as we should, because people want to be outside. It doesn't affect us badly, it really doesn't. And I felt that there was definitely room in the market. Now, there's some very good competition out there, but certainly in terms of critical mass, there was space there as well. No, I believe in clustering. I don't want you to think about your market share of the existing pie. I want you to think about how much bigger can we make the pie, and we're the key part of building the pie. That's fine. But our share may go down, but our business will go up because we've made the pie bigger. And I absolutely believe that that's part of our mission here. And to his credit, Paul at Guinness Storehouse is a firm believer in that. Yeah. And you go back to the world of Coke, there's a great story, which is true because I've heard him say it many times, a former president of the company, great supporter of Ireland, had an honorary degree, he died last year, Don Keogh. Don, who the gift of the gab, Don in an interview said once about, asked about Pepsi as a competitor. And he said, if Pepsi didn't exist, we would have to have invented them. Well, we clearly didn't expect that we would not be noticed to the degree that we were not noticed. We also didn't understand the lag effect in terms of people coming on board. I mean, we even had difficulty getting important people to come down and see it. Didn't want to allocate the time. And I do think that there was some museums shouldn't be for profit, and we're for profit. Now, the for profit is actually not to make an awful lot of money, but unless we don't exist on any subsidy. So in order to have sustainability, in order to have longevity, we've got to be a profitable enterprise. So it's the philosophy around it. The money we make is in the building per se, but not, you know, it's not epic. But we've got to be able to keep funding it. And I think there was a little bit of that as well. And also we have a difficult, I think the marketing communication is not easy, because history doesn't excite a lot. We've got something which, in terms of the actual, you've been through the exhibit, is exciting when you're in there. But how do you communicate that when what it would appear you're doing is you're trying to get people into history and into a museum, when actually you're selling excitement? And communicating that, we didn't get right. And I don't think we still have it quite right either, by the way.
Memories of there?
Yeah, I mean, not a lot of memories, because I actually didn't live in Downpatrick for 10 years. I was born there because it was the bombing of Belfast, and all of my father's fingerprints and ballistics. So all the records were moved out to Downpatrick to get them away from the bombing of Belfast. As soon as the war was over, went back into Belfast. So actually, I was really in Belfast. But we used to go back to Downpatrick. We stayed in a house that belonged to a farmer out in the Coil, and we go back and see him on the farm. And I mean, it was a typical Irish farmyard of that era, but and it was the open fire and all of that. Belfast was home. Yeah, I went to Belfast. I went to the preparatory for Belfast High School, Somerton House. And we had a house there, and of course a lot of family. And my father used to go back, and I learned this from him. He used to get the family together, and we'd have a big dinner, probably a few drinks. But it was interesting, because what he became was, even though he was from outside, members of the family, different parts of the family, they don't see each other. And yet, this is when they all came together, when we came. And then I continued to do that after my father passed away. And I mean, I do that with my rugby fraternity back in Cape Town. And it's really quite interesting how, although you're not there, you're the glue that brings it together, and then that glues you back to your heritage as well. It's supposed that we'd never been able to trace it, and we can go back to the beginning of the 1800s, when there was a John Isdell who was a carpenter, and that's about it. No, allegedly, and this is allegedly, it's comes from détail. It's French, and it's then the Irish derivation of what was really, salt, basically. Huguenot. That's the guesswork, but otherwise we really don't know. And there's not very many Isdells around, no. He had always wanted to leave Ireland, and he actually had got an appointment to leave Ireland after he left school. He didn't go to university, and he was under 21. His father wouldn't let him go. And then, so he stayed, and then he was getting near retirement. And well, he tried to go during the war, he was designated as someone who couldn't leave his current position. It was too important. And so he made a number of efforts. And then he decided, when he was eligible for retirement after 25 years, that he wanted to leave, and an opportunity came up to head up the fingerprints ballistic and the then Northern Rhodesia Police. 10 years old, when I was up with my father at 5 in the morning, watching Table Mountain rise from the sea as you came in. That's the visual that you get. It was January, and summers are the long days. We're up early, so you've got to get up early. And here's this, I mean, Cape Town to me is still one of the best cities in the world. I mean, travel, you understand that. I've actually got an apartment in Cape Town. Well, not still, we bought about 4 years ago. I spent 2.5 months in Cape Town now. Yeah, Africa, yes. I mean, there's so much. So there was Cape Town, then there was a 3.5-day rail journey, 2,000 miles up to Zambia. And, you know, it was steam trains, and everyone went by boat in those days. 1950s, yeah. The air travel was 3 days because they didn't fly at night. You used to stop along the way. It was, and you know, the sounds and the smell of Africa. Watching this whole thing go by for three and a half days, then arriving there, and you know, the capital city. The main road was only half tarred. There was no platform. It was just a dirt platform. I mean, this was 250,000 people in the city. Is now something like 5. You know, very, very different days, and the big skies, and then. The most emotive thing about Africa, most people will tell you, is the smell of the earth, or that is released from the earth at the first rains. And it's a very unique thing, and you go out there, and this amazing aroma. Of course, you have to have experienced the 5 months of no rain, of drought beforehand, so there's a psychological piece. And the rain builds up, and it comes, and then it just releases this. So there's an emotive side of it, and my wife, who went out there when she was 8, so she was similar background. We met, got married there, so we share that, and we spend a lot of time back there with wildlife and the like. That's one of my other passions. Is that, you know, I'm currently chairman of the World Wildlife Fund in the US. I landed yesterday morning from being at the Pantanal, in the Pantanal in Brazil. Just spent 9 days with the family. We were very fortunate. We saw 5 different jaguars in those 9 days, giant ant bears and all of that. So we 3 different lodges. Royal African Safaris look after, we work with them. So we do a lot of travel. We're actually off on a trip now in end of September. We're doing Bhutan, Laos, and going back to see some friends in Thailand. So those would be 2 countries we haven't been to, and Bhutan's a fascinating place. So I continue to explore. When I retired 9 years ago, my wife and I sat down, made a list of the 29 places we wanted to go to. And a lot of them are onces, you know, they're not go back places. It's difficult to say, where's your favorite place? We have 4 homes. So I don't have a favorite place from a travel standpoint, because we've based ourselves in 4 different places we love. Cape Town, Atlanta, Barbados, which is my formal residence, and in France. When I was working in the Philippines, we took a holiday to France, and we had a wonderful visit there, and we've literally spent every summer our vacation, which was not as long as it is now, in France. We had a home up north of Toulouse. Now we're down in Provence. We bought an old mas, or ma, depending whether you're... Are you getting it? Okay.
It's good.
It hadn't been lived in for 17 years, and we renovated it. Going back to the way when my wife's asked the question, she says, I'll tell you, every time we leave one of our homes, we're unhappy to have left, but we're happy to arrive in the other one. And, and they're all parts of a year, because you don't want to be in France in January, February. You don't want to be in Cape Town in July, August, for example. Okay.
29, how many of the 29 have you done in your 9 years?
4 to go, and 2 we'll knock off this year. We actually spent time out near Portaferry on a farm, because their dad could come. I'd be there with my mother. My dad could work as well, and then we'd be out there. But we did travel around Ireland. One of my favourite memories, and I've been back there with Pamela, was Achill Island and Keel Strand and all of that. We did Connemara, and so we did take trips around Ireland, because my father, one of the reasons that he left and wanted to leave was, he was in the RUC, but the rugby club that he was part of, Malone, was not a sectarian club. Okay, put it that way. There were obviously rugby was mainly Protestant, but there were Catholic priests who were members of the club and what have you. And we always used to come down for internationals to Dublin. My father had all the links through with the Goddess of Kona and the like. So we're all Ireland people, and that's why we would take holidays within Ireland, not just within Northern Ireland. Okay. Well, I would pick Botswana, the Okavango Delta.
Yeah.
We go there. In fact, we're back there again next year. We actually go on safari just about every year, and we'll go back to places. We like Mombo Camp on the Delta. I'm involved with rhino conservation Botswana. There's a trust there, and we're relocating rhinos back in, black and white rhinos in. So I'm involved in that. That takes me back there as well. We haven't won yet, and we're not winning, but we've stopped the growth. Now, some of the poaching has shifted in areas, so as the Krugers diminished, they've gone to Natal. There's parts of that, but I do think it's sustainable in certain areas. I think Botswana is going to be part of it. I think the Delta is part of it, and that's why I'm involved in that, because obviously because it's a Delta, the level of protection you can give to the rhinos is much greater. So I think we're going to be able to save them, but there's a lot more to be done. And what we're doing at the moment is the stage that everyone's been at with regard to elephants. Is we're actually only dealing with what I would call level 3, which is the poachers and the people who run the poachers sort of on the ground. There are a few middlemen have been caught now, but the big guys haven't been pulled down yet. And then right at the top of that is something that's now happening for ivory but hasn't happened yet for rhinos, is demystifying the demand. In other words, debunking the beliefs around it. With rhinos, it's a little bit more difficult because of the perceived medicinal things, whereas ivory is more trophy and all of that. And of course, there's been a very big win last year when the Chinese government said they were going to close down all the the ivory stores, and they've closed about half of them down already. that announcement was the end, and it said they'd have them all closed by the end of this year. And the way they're moving, it looks like that's what's going to happen. That doesn't take away an illegal trade, which will still go, but certainly the open trading and the support of the Chinese government has been withdrawn. Vietnam hasn't got there yet. There are others haven't got there, but I mean China was the big one. So that's going to shift the needle with regard to with ivory. And if you can see, if you reduce the demand, then you reduce the price as well.
The prices are enormous, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean,
the rewards are enormous for a
the rewards. You can understand how people get involved, but I mean, there are wonderful stories. The key to the whole thing is this: you've got to get the demand side in these ones. But if you're talking about conservation as a whole, unless it is to the benefit of the local people and they perceive it to be to their benefit, we will not win. It's all great about, it's wonderful for us nice rich people to go and watch the animals and take photographs and say how much we love the countryside. The people who want to educate, well, feed themselves and educate their children and what have you, and unless it helps them do that, we will not preserve what we want to be preserved. So you've got to think about it that way. But when you, probably one of the best examples, and of course it's been quite authoritarian, but so you can criticize it in one way, but some of the wonderful things that they've done in Rwanda around the gorilla, it's now the national emblem. You know the story about the naming of of them every year, and so now there's this national pride in the gorilla. That's what will save it in Rwanda, because it's theirs. It's their national emblem. What we're trying to do with the rhino now, which was shot out in Botswana in the 60s, is actually do the same thing. And Ian Kama is part of that. Prince Harry is actually a patron. I was out there with him in May. And I was going back to, most of it is being run by local Botswanans who've been trained up. And their commitment is absolutely amazing, chatting to these guys. And as they spread that out to their villages and to chiefs and the whole thing. I was up in Zambia, I was up in the Luwa Plains. He's amazing, because he takes on the toughest areas. I mean, he's just doing 500 elephants up into the northern part of Malawi. You know that story. Peter's absolutely amazing. But what he does, and Luwa's part of it, is he thinks local community all the way through. Yeah. Okay? And that's why he's successful. That's why governments allow him to do what he does, give him his 20-year lease and whatever it is. And I'm just supporting. I think he knows now. I've just given some support to them, because they're going to take over, or they're planning to take over Kafue National Park. They're trying to get an agreement with the Zambian government. They've got Bangwelu and they've got Luwa, and now they're trying to do Kafue. And I hope they get it, because that'll be the big one. And the one to watch is this whole Kaza thing, if we can pull that off. And I've got some involvement with regard to Kaza as well, because and there are rumors about Angola actually declaring a far bigger reserve, which will be the biggest one in Africa. Now, if that happens, that'll be fantastic, as long as it's policed. Zimbabwe is a mixed story. Certainly there are areas where there's been obliteration, and there's still some heavy poaching that goes on. But I was in Hwangi, I guess it's now 2 years ago last. That's still thriving. And there's now a move to open up the Tushadona area on Lake Kariba again. So there's still a group of people, and they're all Zimbabweans, and both racial groups, who managed to keep it going. So I don't think it's under pressure, but I think there's enough people there holding it together that when the inevitable happens to Mr. Mugabe, that it can come back. I think the Congo is a real problem,
again, yeah.
and of course West Africa generally. I mean, actually, I want to get. Have you been to Chad?
Never.
No. I want to go there to see those desert elephants, and you know, I've got to think about how I do that for obvious reasons. But I want to get there, and
Yeah.
Cape Town was the leading anti-apartheid university, which was actually protecting its rights to be multiracial, even though it was at about a 3.5%. But it was the Open Universities Act, and our protest was against that, and I was involved. My father,
By the way, give me
I was there from 62 to 65. My father, because he was anti-sectarian in terms of Ireland, was therefore obviously also against racial division. And he actually converted the whole of his fingerprint department that he took over. All of the people were all expatriates, all white expatriates. By the time he left and handed over, they were all Zambians. It was the first part of the Zambian police force that was totally Zambian. He was head of the Wild Geese Society. So again, your Irish connection. And they ran the St. Patrick's Night Ball, and the patron, and he was there every year, was the president, Kenneth Kaunda. So again, these things all link together. So I was brought up with this belief that racial division was all right. And you go back to moments in your life. I must have been about 8 when a Nigerian policeman came for a week to Belfast, and he stayed at our house. And then I saw apartheid, and I thought, well, this was a great guy, and he gave me a few little gifts from Nigeria and all that, all those things. And I just couldn't believe these seats with whites only and what have you on. But I still went to Cape Town University, and I went to Cape Town University against the wishes of my parents. My dad wanted me to come to Trinity. My father really wanted me to play international rugby, actually. That was what he wanted.
So you're a failure, Neville, no matter whatever
Yeah.
you've achieved in your life.
Yeah. But I had a very good friend, and we decided, I decided I wanted to go to Cape Town University when I was 10, and they didn't know that, because we spent 4 days in Cape Town before we went up to Zambia, and I saw the university on the hill, and I said, that's where I want to go. But that was just to me. So they were on a hiding to nothing. I was going to Cape Town. And then this friend of mine wanted to go, and I went to Cape Town Varsity. And that was a great choice. And then I got involved with the anti-apartheid movement with NUSAS. Was elected to the Students' Council on a NUSAS ticket. And then basically I went to Johannesburg for a while, but then I went back to Zambia.
Were you under pressure as, the police kept a very close eye on that university?
Well, yeah, I mean, I did have, I stayed in a house with, because I was for a while the editor of the university newspaper.
Okay.
So that was
see a pattern here, yeah.
That was part of it, yeah. I mean, even then, if you think, I do all sorts of things now. I did all sorts of things then. I was, because I played first team basketball, first team rugby. I was on the SRC. For me, that was finishing school for me. And having come from, a family that was basically in government service up in Zambia, and I meet these sons of stockbrokers and all of that. So I did social science. I'm a qualified social worker. I'm still a registered social worker in South Africa. I met them all, and I said, no, this is me. Business is where I want to be, and that was I started with a clothing company, but then had an offer to go back to Zambia. Happened to be in this business, and 43 years later I retired. I was not surprised that it hung on so long. I remember being on a train, and somehow or other I was with a group of Afrikaners, but like 3 other guys, so they were not a big group. And we got down to politics. And whilst we fundamentally disagreed with each other, what I learned was that this was their belief system, racial inferiority, and it was absolutely ingrained within them. And I think one of the things that people don't do enough is they don't try and understand why someone else believes something. You try and argue them away from their belief because you know they're wrong. But actually, if you're going to build a bridge, you need to understand what they really believe, why they believe what they believe. So sort of a 180-degree thing. And social science actually taught me that, which has been very good for my business career as well, because most people are more, I'll out-argue you rather than I'll find a way to build a bridge. But I understood how deep that was within the Afrikaner. And whilst English-speaking South Africans will now largely tell you that they were against apartheid, they rode on the wagon very happily. Right.
I can buy into that.
Yeah.
Because like the economy was growing really fast and nothing had to be shared.
Yeah.
In that 60s period.
Yeah, and
a
it
lot
was
of money sloshing
yes,
around. Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, talking about lack of understanding, because obviously most of my friends were English speaking, and I would actually into trouble at dinner parties. But one of the things I was able to do at Coke, because I had a permit that allowed me to go into Soweto. As a white person, you needed a permit to go into South. Right? I mean, that's how divided it was. And you're supposed to leave by 6 o'clock at night. So I would sit at dinner party and they'd tell me about how, well, really, you don't understand that black South Africans are very happy the way things are and what have you. And I said, well, have you ever been to Soweto? No, you can't go to Soweto. I said, well, look, I've been to Soweto. And what I used to do on occasions, not very often, but they had these illegal drinking places because they were supposed to only sell African beer. And they had these, and it was one of these modus vivendi things that takes place. So I used to go there with my rep, who was black South African, and go to the drinking places and sit there. And it was very interesting because, I mean, there's a white man there, so now I was welcomed. It was really interesting, but then you really got into discussions, and I would sneak out at 8 o'clock sometimes, for illegally, but having had a few beers with these people. Interesting evolution, and I'm wandering a little bit here, but
this is your worldview.
I did know, not that apartheid was going to end, but that there was going to be a blow up. Because I suddenly started feeling uncomfortable. I wasn't welcome. There was something happening, and Christmas '75, I was at Sunnyside Park Hotel with some of my mates, and we get into this, and I say, there's another shopful coming. And I had the argument, and basically said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to sell my house. So I go home and tell my wife, I said, we're going to sell our house. What do you mean we're going to sell our house? I said, there's another shopful coming. And I put it on the market, and luckily 10 days before, because I wasn't pushing it, I didn't see it was going to happen tomorrow, I actually sold it. And 18 months later we rented, and then 18 months later I bought a house which would have at the time been twice the value because the property prices collapsed. I'm somewhat forgiving, because I saw it happen just about every African country. You have to understand the inevitability of the fact that it's going to be a black ruled country, and that because you have not put in the educational systems and you have not prepared people, there are going to be bad mistakes made. And it's got nothing to do with the fact that they're black or they're white. They're just bad mistakes made. People run things badly. I mean, you know, it took a while for Ireland to sort themselves out and decide how it should be run as a proper country. This is much worse. I wouldn't prognosticate about where South Africa is going to end up until December, and that we'll see who heads up the ANC. I know Cyril well. Cyril was a Coke bottler. Cyril Ramaphosa, the deputy president. If it is Dlamini, if it's the former wife, it'll be a disaster because, and there is a potential, I think, for tribal conflict because the Zulus have taken over now, and they're not going to give up easily. But he does help provide opposition, which is good in its own way. Judas Malema. But I think it's all to play for. They still have, with all of the problems, they still have by far the best infrastructure in Africa. It's still there. You're certainly, they've managed over the last 20 years to get a functioning black middle class, educated, functioning black middle class, which is probably not big enough yet, but which is now turning against the ANC and understanding what is really happening. Whether they have the size and the heft to pull it through, I don't know. But that's something that hasn't existed in a lot of the other African countries. So that gives you hope, all right? But the degree to which corruption has got into it, and the Guptas and Zuma and all of that, and how they control so many of the power sources, also makes you worried. So I'm sort of straddling here. I am not wholly pessimistic, but it's going to have to go through a rough patch because they've made it's like, you know, when you have excess. I mean, look at the bursting of the bubble here. You've got to go through quite a bit of hell before you get it back up again, and that's what's going to that's what could happen there. And there's a nasty piece that worries me, because one of the things that a lot of people are playing with the race cards, and if you lose that intellectual capital. I actually do a lot of my medical stuff in Cape Town. There are, there's still enough really good professional. And my wife has given up her U.S. dentist. The guy with state-of-the-art equipment, just brilliant dentist in Cape Town. And there's still just that little. The core is there. It's eroding. So it's a matter of, the timing issue here. At just about the same time as I was brought back, because I was brought out of retirement, here I was, an Irishman heading up Coca Cola, and there was an Australian heading up McDonald's. And it was never, when we were appointed, they would say Irishman, Australian. You read the British press, Carney has always said the Canadian Carney. If you're not English, they'll say, Willie Walsh, the Irishman, boom, boom, boom. America, they don't do that. It'll have been commented on, but you're there, you're in the position. So the fact that you're not American is absolutely irrelevant. It really is. And just to underscore that, here's Coke, it's a global company. So if you go back to the 80s, Gazueta took over, Cuban. He was succeeded by an American who only lasted 18 months. he was then succeeded by an Australian, who was succeeded by me, an Irishman. I was succeeded by a Turkish American, and now there's a Brit running the Coca Cola company. And have you seen any press saying, make Coke American again? No.
Is it like the movies? Is it sort of backstabbing and kitchen cabinets and plots and coups and
No.
levels? Is it?
No, it's 1 minute, I see. No, look, it depends on the industry, and it depends where in the industry. If you go back to the sort of area that Trump worked in terms of the whole house, I wouldn't say hotels, but actually the property business, and there's some great good property people who don't deal with things the way Trump does. That's the sort of industry you're talking about, where it is rough and it's tough and what have you. But generally, no. Is there cronyism? There is everywhere. Everyone works with their mates, and that's the way it is. But I mean, I was at a dinner party at their home in France of friends of ours from Atlanta, with 6 couples, all Georgians from Atlanta, who are worldly. They travel. There's a cadre of very global Americans who are probably, maybe not quite today, but the most influential people in the country. Now, when you go down to another level, then of exposure, it's such a big country. I mean, you say to most, if you did some research, how many Americans have been to California who are not Californian? I mean, a very low percentage. You know that. So that's how you got to understand how they see the rest of the world, because they don't know the rest of the world.
Of your time in Cork, what do you look back on that gives you a particular pride, that gives you a little hum of satisfaction?
I think more than anything else, it's the businesses that I managed to build, and the people, because I was very lucky in doing the opening of the Soviet Union and all of those things, and the turnarounds, and the people that I managed to develop and work with. Because if you don't enjoy the people you're working with, and you don't feel happy every day when you go to work, give it up, do something else. And I had 43 great years. So not everyone was perfect, but I had 43 great years.
Thank you very much, Neville.
Okay, my pleasure.